My adopted daughter found her real family and cut me off after she turned 24. She said, "Now I can be with my own family. I don't need you anymore." A few weeks later, she came back, and what happened next was rather unbelievable that I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Debbie Patterson from Spokane Valley, USA. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I never planned on becoming a father, let alone a single one. I was 31, working maintenance for the school district, fixing busted HVAC systems, and rewiring gym lights. Quiet work, but it paid the bills and left me time to come home to a quiet apartment and microwave dinners. Then came the call. My cousin, Amanda, had relapsed again. Meth, same as always, and Child Protective Services had taken her daughter. Layla, 3 years old, big brown eyes, curls matted from neglect, clinging to a stuffed raccoon like it was the only safe thing left in the world. I'd only met her once before at a family barbecue, but when they asked if I could take her in just for a few weeks, something in me said yes before my brain caught up. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. I remember the first night she slept in my house. She was too small for the bed, so I made a nest out of pillows and blankets on the floor next to mine. She didn't speak much, just watched me with that mix of suspicion and exhaustion kids get when they've already seen too much. At one point in the night, I felt her crawl into my bed and curl up next to me like she'd done it 100 times. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just lay there, listening to her soft, stuttered breathing and thinking, God, what the hell am I doing? But in the morning, when she reached up and grabbed my hand without looking, I realized I didn't need to have all the answers. I just had to stay. Those few weeks turned into months, then years. I took classes to become a certified foster parent, then started the adoption process not long after her 4th birthday. Amanda was in and out of rehab, always promising she'd get clean, always slipping back into the same cycle. When the judge asked me if I wanted to pursue full custody, I didn't even hesitate. Layla wasn't a temporary obligation anymore. She was my daughter, mine in every way that counted, even if we didn't share blood. I worked overtime to afford her ballet lessons. I learned how to braid her hair from YouTube videos. I sat through countless recitals, soccer games, school plays, cheering louder than anyone in the crowd because, damn it, she was mine. I didn't have much growing up, but I made sure she never went without. But even as she grew into this smart, sharp-witted teenager, I could see it in her eyes. Curiosity, longing, that unspoken question, why didn't my real parents want me? I answered what I could without painting Amanda or her boyfriend as villains. They loved you. They just weren't ready to take care of you, I'd say. I thought I was doing the right thing by not making it ugly. Maybe that was my mistake, trying to shield her from the truth, hoping love would be enough to keep her grounded in our life, in our bond. We had our rough patches, rebellious years, late-night arguments, slamming doors, but I chalked it up to the usual father-daughter growing pains. I never thought I'd lose her. Not for real. When she turned 24, everything shifted. She'd been talking with Amanda again. Just casual at first, she told me. Some letters, then phone calls. I kept my concerns to myself. Layla was an adult now, and if she needed to explore that part of herself, I wasn't going to stand in the way. But the shift came fast. Too fast. She started canceling dinners, skipping our Sunday coffee runs. I noticed new names on her social media posts, people I didn't recognize, faces that looked eerily familiar to Amanda's side of the family. Then one night, she showed up at my house, not to visit, but to pack. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was giving me a weather report. I found my real parents, and I want to live with them now. I blinked. Layla, you haven't lived here in years. She shrugged. You know what I mean. I want to be with them. I don't need you anymore. I stood there, watching her tuck framed photos of us into a box like they were just decorations, not evidence of an entire life built together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and make her remember the nights I stayed up with her fevered, the times I took off work to make sure she felt supported during finals, The mornings I made pancakes shaped like letters to spell her name. But I didn't. I just stood there like a damn statue, pride and heartbreak fighting for the same space in my chest. You don't need me anymore? I repeated, half-dazed. That's what this is? She didn't even flinch. I need to know who I am. And they can give me answers you never could. She might as well have taken a bat to my ribs. After she left, I sat in her empty childhood room for what felt like hours. I picked up an old drawing she'd made of us, her stick figure self holding hands with me, labeled Daddy. I laughed bitterly. What a joke, I thought. All those years, and I was just a placeholder. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal, it was the finality. She hadn't left a crack in the door. She hadn't said, maybe, or I'll visit. She made it clear. She was done. And I was supposed to just accept it. I didn't tell many people. When friends asked about Layla, I gave vague answers. She's finding herself. She's reconnecting with her roots. I couldn't bring myself to say the truth. She left me for the people who abandoned her in the first place. Because how do you even say that without sounding bitter? How do you explain the kind of grief that doesn't come with a funeral, the kind that walks away breathing and smiling and posts about their new life on Instagram like you never existed? I started sleeping with the TV on. Silence was unbearable. I couldn't look at the old photo albums or the box of drawings I kept from her elementary school days. It all felt like evidence in a case I had already lost. And yet, through it all, I kept reminding myself of one truth. I was the one who stayed. Through sickness, tantrums, heartbreaks, college rejections, I stayed. They didn't. I raised her. They resurfaced after the hard work was done. So why did she choose them? That question sat in my chest like a hot coal. But even worse was the answer I didn't want to admit. Maybe love, my love, wasn't enough. I kept replaying the moment in my head. Her standing in the doorway, hands on her hips like she was delivering some overdue notice. I don't need you anymore. I couldn't wrap my head around how casually she said it. No hesitation, no flicker of guilt in her voice. Just finality. Like I was a teacher she'd outgrown or a jacket she no longer wore. I had spent 2 decades being her everything. From the first time she called me Dad, to the last time she crashed on my couch crying over a breakup, I'd been the one to catch her when the world knocked her down. So hearing her dismiss me like that wasn't just painful, it felt like erasure. Like I'd been written out of my own story, replaced with strangers who showed up once the ink was dry. I didn't say much that day. I don't even remember what I said, honestly. It's funny how in those moments, those life-defining moments, you imagine yourself rising to the occasion, saying something profound, something that'll stick in their mind forever. But all I could muster was silence. She packed a small suitcase, grabbed a tote bag, and walked out with barely a glance. I watched from the window as she got into a car I didn't recognize. The driver was a woman, mid-40s, lean, and sharp-eyed. Amanda, her biological mother. My cousin. The one who vanished from rehab 5 years ago and resurfaced on social media only to disappear again. And now she was back, just in time to reclaim the daughter she threw away like spoiled leftovers. I clenched my jaw until it hurt, watching the car disappear down the road. I didn't cry. I wish I had. Maybe it would have felt like some kind of release. Instead, I just stood there, rigid, hollow, like someone had vacuumed the soul out of me. The worst part wasn't the abandonment, it was the performance. Within hours, Layla had updated her profile picture, a selfie with Amanda and her biological father, Darren, at what looked like some diner. The caption read, "Finally found my way home." Hundreds of likes. Comments flooded in. "So happy for you. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water." I read each one like a punch to the gut. No one knew the truth. No one knew who raised her, who sat in ER waiting rooms, who scraped together college tuition when scholarships fell through. I wanted to comment something, anything, but I didn't. What would I even say? Actually, I was the one who raised her while these two were too high to remember her birthday. No, that would make me look bitter, petty, and maybe I was. But I wasn't going to play that game. Not online. Not in front of an audience who didn't care about facts, just narratives. I tried to get on with life. I poured myself into work, picked up extra shifts, stayed late fixing boilers and rewiring classrooms. My boss noticed. "Everything good at home?" he asked one evening while we locked up. I nodded too quickly. Yeah, just trying to stay busy. He gave me that look, the one people give when they know you're lying but don't want to press. That became my rhythm. Stay busy. Don't think. Don't feel. Just keep moving. But every time I came home to that quiet house, something in me cracked. Her pictures were still everywhere, framed on shelves, taped to the fridge. I kept telling myself I'd take them down, box them up, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Maybe it was denial. Maybe I was still holding out hope that this was just a phase, a temporary lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew better. About a week after she left, I ran into Cheryl at the grocery store, Layla's high school English teacher. She recognized me immediately. Mr. Henderson, how's Layla doing these days? I froze. The smile dropped from my face like a stone. She's good, I said. My voice cracked on the word. Cheryl noticed. Oh, she said softly. I didn't mean to pry. I shook my head. It's all right. She's just with her birth parents now. Cheryl's face shifted, surprise, then awkward sympathy. Well, I hope she's happy, she said. I nodded. Yeah, me too. But what I wanted to say, what I should have said, was, she walked away from the only person who ever gave a damn about her, and I don't know if I'll ever be okay with that. One night, maybe 10 days after she left, I sat in the dark scrolling through old videos on my phone. Layla at age 5, missing her 2 front teeth, trying to sing the ABCs. Layla at 10, blowing out birthday candles and shouting, "Best dad ever." Layla at 16, showing off her driver's license, beaming with pride. I watched each one like a masochist, soaking in the memories that now felt tainted. I kept wondering, did she ever mean it? Any of it? Was I just a pit stop on the way to someone she thought could offer her something more? It wasn't just rejection. It was betrayal. A betrayal that ran so deep it made me question my own instincts. Had I done something wrong? Was I too strict? Too lenient? Not affectionate enough? Too much? My mind spiraled in every direction, looking for a reason that might make sense of the senseless. I finally opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured 2 fingers, then 3. I sat on the porch in the dark, letting the burn settle in my chest like a sedative. My neighbor, Phil, stepped out for a smoke and waved. "Quiet night," he said. I nodded. Too quiet. He didn't press. He just stood there, puffing in silence, and for once, I appreciated the lack of conversation. I didn't want advice. I didn't want comfort. I wanted clarity. But that doesn't come in bottles or cigarettes or silence. It comes in waves. Unpredictable, crashing, relentless. What hit me hardest was the realization that I couldn't fix this. I'd spent my entire life fixing things. Pipes, wires, broken doors, broken hearts. But this was beyond repair. Layla hadn't just left. She'd made a statement. A choice. She chose them. Over me. Over the man who raised her, bled for her, sacrificed for her. She looked at everything I gave her, every late night, every scraped dollar, every bit of unconditional love, and decided it wasn't enough. And maybe that was the moment I truly started to let go. Not with anger, not with hate, just with understanding. Painful, gut-wrenching understanding. She didn't want me anymore. And for the first time, I stopped wanting her to want me. It was just past 2 a.m. when my phone lit up with her name. I hadn't seen it on my screen in weeks. Not since the night she walked out of my life with that suitcase and a smile meant for strangers. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I stared at the screen, heart thudding in my chest, torn between answering and throwing the phone across the room. The call went to voicemail, and a second later, the notification popped up. My thumb hovered over it for a good 5 minutes. Part of me didn't want to hear her voice. Not if it meant reopening wounds that had just begun to scab over. But curiosity, no, something closer to grief, won out. I pressed play. Her voice was shaking. "Dad, I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I don't know who else to call. I made a mistake. I thought." Her voice broke into a sob. "I thought they loved me, but all they want is money. They want me to co-sign on a loan. They asked for $5,000 to pay off credit cards, and when I said no, they got angry. Darren told me I owed him for abandoning me. Amanda keeps bringing up how much it cost to raise me." Like what? She didn't raise me. You did. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. Please call me back." Then silence. just the soft sound of her crying until the voicemail cut off. I sat there frozen, phone still in my hand. It wasn't the apology I thought I'd always wanted. It wasn't a child returning home in tears with arms wide open and regret etched into every breath. It was desperation, panic, a young woman realizing that blood ties don't always bind in love, and biology doesn't mean safety. I felt a rush of things: rage at Amanda and Darren for exploiting her, sorrow for Layla's pain, and, strangely, a flicker of vindication. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because now she finally saw what I had tried so hard to protect her from. They didn't love her. Not in the way that mattered. Not like I did. The next morning, I listened to the voicemail again. Then again. The third time, I didn't feel anything. Just numbness. I knew what she wanted: another chance. Another homecoming. Another soft place to land. But I also knew what it had cost me the first time. I'd spent weeks spiraling into a pit I hadn't seen since my early 20s, before therapy, before stability, before her. I'd felt useless, disposable. Like all the years I poured into her life could be reduced to a shrug and a goodbye. And now, after all that, she wanted back in. But love, real love, can't survive when it's only convenient. 2 days later, she showed up. I hadn't responded, hadn't called. I guess she figured silence meant invitation. She looked thinner, paler, and older somehow, like the world had worn through that last layer of youthful arrogance. She stood on my porch holding that same suitcase she took with her when she left. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I opened the door, but didn't move aside to let her in. She looked up at me, eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her. And in that moment, I think she realized this wasn't going to be easy. "I know I hurt you," she said, barely above a whisper. I was stupid. I thought being with them would fix something inside me. I thought if I found where I came from, I'd finally feel whole. But they're not what I imagined. They're selfish. They're manipulative. They guilt me into helping with bills, promised they'd pay me back, then laughed when I brought it up again. They only call me when they need something. They don't care about me. Not really. Not like you do. I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without shaking. "You do love me, don't you?" she asked. Even now, that was the hardest part. Of course I loved her. You don't raise someone for 2 decades and just switch that off like a light. But love doesn't mean returning to a burning building just because the walls look familiar. I took a breath. "I loved you every day you were mine," I said. "But love isn't a revolving door, Layla. You can't walk out, slam it behind you, and then expect me to stand there waiting when the world disappoints you." She looked stunned, like she hadn't even considered that my love might come with boundaries. Maybe that was my fault. Maybe I had spent so long saying yes, so long rescuing, that she assumed I'd always be there no matter what. "I messed up," she said, stepping closer. "But I'm trying to make it right." I shook my head. "No, you're trying to make it easy. And I can't give you that. Not this time." I saw the tears well up, her shoulders shaking. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't turn me away." And for a moment, God help me, I almost caved. But then I remembered the night she left. The coldness in her voice. The way she said, "I don't need you anymore," like it was a business transaction, not a farewell. I remembered the ache of walking past her room, still filled with the ghost of a daughter who decided I wasn't enough. And I remembered the voicemail, not the one where she begged, but the silence that followed. Weeks without a single word. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. And this, her showing up now, this was just another choice. One made out of consequence, not love. "I'm not your backup plan, Layla," I said. "I'm not the one you come back to when things fall apart. I was your dad when no one else wanted to be. And you left me. That means something. It has to." She broke then, completely. Fell to her knees on the porch, crying the kind of cry that twists something in your gut. But I didn't reach for her. I didn't kneel down like I used to when she scraped her knees or came home from school bullied and broken. This time, I stood still. Because loving someone sometimes means letting them feel the full weight of their choices. Eventually, she picked herself up, turned, and walked down the steps, suitcase rattling behind her like a trailing apology. I closed the door, locked it, then sat on the couch and stared at the wall for hours. I didn't cry. Not that night. Maybe I would later. But for now, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt clarity. And God, it was a relief. The thing about setting boundaries is that no one claps for you when you do it. There's no standing ovation, no tearful applause from the people who've drained you. It's quiet. It's cold. And it's the loneliest kind of freedom. After Layla walked away from my doorstep that night, dragging that same suitcase she left with weeks earlier, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. I felt hollow. Like I'd finally put down something I'd been carrying so long I forgot what it felt like not to. I sat in the kitchen, lights off, phone face down, and just breathed. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't taste like guilt. The next morning, I opened the blinds and let the sun in. It was late October, and the leaves had begun their slow descent to the ground, covering the yard in gold and rust. I used to rake them with Layla when she was a kid. She'd jump into the piles before I could finish, laughing so hard she'd hiccup. I remembered once, when she was maybe 9, she turned to me mid-jump and said, "I love you more than all the leaves in the world." It was such a silly, beautiful thing to say, and it had meant everything. But that was before love became transactional, before it came with demands, ultimatums, and quiet betrayals. I went about my day as normally as I could, ran errands, picked up groceries, even stopped by the hardware store to grab supplies for a project I'd been putting off, fixing the back steps. It felt good to work with my hands again, to fix something tangible, something that stayed fixed when I was done. Around mid-afternoon, my neighbor Lisa came over with banana bread. She was older, widowed, the kind of woman who always knew too much about everyone but never made you feel like she was judging. "Heard some crying the other night," she said gently, handing me the foil-wrapped loaf. "Everything okay?" I shrugged. "Family stuff." She gave me a look, the kind only people who've lived through enough heartache can pull off. "Just don't forget to take care of yourself," she said. "Sometimes loving someone means stepping back." I nodded. I didn't need advice, but it was comforting to be seen. Later that evening, I got a text from my sister, Jordan. She'd heard from our cousin Tina, who heard from someone else that Layla had shown up at my house and left in tears. "What the hell happened?" she wrote. "You didn't even let her in?" I didn't reply right away. I knew where this was going. Jordan had always had a soft spot for Layla. She never adopted kids herself, but liked to play the role of the wise aunt, full of empathy and second chances. I finally replied. She left. She made her choice. I'm just respecting it. A minute later, the phone rang. "What does that even mean?" Jordan said the second I picked up. "She's your daughter, Matt. You don't just shut the door on your kid." I leaned against the counter, rubbing my temples. She shut it first. Or did everyone conveniently forget that part? Jordan sighed. She was confused. She wanted to find her roots. "That doesn't mean she doesn't love you." She said she didn't need me. I snapped, louder than I meant to. "She erased me, Jordan. And now that things didn't work out the way she dreamed, I'm just supposed to pretend none of that happened?" There was silence on the line. Then, softly, "I'm just saying, maybe give her time." I ended the call without another word. Not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of being told to bend until I broke. Over the next week, the fallout started to ripple. A cousin unfollowed me on Facebook. An old family friend sent me a passive-aggressive message about the power of forgiveness. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought they knew better. But none of them were there when Layla looked me in the eyes and said I didn't matter. None of them felt the weight of her silence when I went to bed each night wondering if the last 20 years had meant anything to her at all. People love redemption arcs, stories where the prodigal child returns, where love conquers all. But they never talk about what it costs the one who was left behind. The next confrontation came not from Layla, but from Darren. Yeah, her biological father. He had the gall to call me. I didn't recognize the number at first, so I answered out of habit. "You think you're better than us?" he barked before I could even say hello. "You think just 'cause you had her for a few years, you're more of a father than me?" My blood went cold. "A few years? Try 2 decades. He laughed, bitter, condescending. "Man, you raised her soft. That's why she came back to us. She needed real parents." I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just said, "You used her. You manipulated her. You don't get to talk to me about being a parent." Then I hung up and blocked the number. That night, I found myself pacing the house. The quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt charged, like something was still unresolved. But it wasn't about Layla. It wasn't even about Amanda or Darren. It was about me. About all the parts of myself I had buried for her. The relationships I passed on, the vacations I never took, the hobbies I let fade. I had given her everything. My time, my money, my heart. And now, for the first time, I was giving something back to myself. Permission. Permission to not pick up the pieces. Permission to not accept an apology that only came when her world collapsed. Permission to choose myself. The next morning, I cleared out her room. Not as an act of vengeance, but as a declaration. I packed up her childhood books, the stuffed animals she hadn't looked at in years, the soccer trophies gathering dust. I boxed up the memories not to forget them, but to stop living in them. I kept a few things, photos, drawings, letters she wrote when she was little. But the rest went into storage. The room looked empty without her presence, but not in a sad way. In a clean way. Like the closing of a chapter that had long overstayed its welcome. By the end of the week, something had shifted in me. I no longer waited for her to call. I no longer replayed the voicemail. I stopped checking her social media. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I started loving myself enough to let her go. People don't talk enough about that kind of love. The one that sets boundaries, that says, I will not be your emotional crutch just because the people you chose fell apart. That's not bitterness. That's self-respect. You'd think after a confrontation like that, after the tears, the begging, the slammed doors, and the blocked numbers, things would quiet down. But with family, there's never silence, just new echoes. Whispers start where voices stop. A week after I packed up Layla's room, my cousin Tina called me under the pretense of checking in. We hadn't spoken in months. I just wanted to see how you're holding up, she said, voice syrupy sweet, too polished to be genuine. I knew what she really wanted, the story, the drama, the chance to pass along my version to the rest of the peanut gallery. I told her I was fine, just taking things one day at a time. Well, she said with a sigh, you know, people make mistakes. She's young. I didn't take the bait. She's 24, I replied, old enough to know the difference between a misstep and a betrayal. Of course, the calls didn't stop with Tina. My brother called next, James, the so-called voice of reason in the family. Don't let this become permanent, he warned. You'll regret it later. She's your daughter, Matt. But he didn't see her face when she told me I didn't matter. He didn't see the way she brushed past me like I was just another piece of furniture in the life she was eager to escape. Everyone wanted to talk about forgiveness, about second chances. But none of them had been there in the days that followed. When I ate dinner alone in a house that still smelled like her shampoo. When I passed by her closed door and had to remind myself she wasn't coming home. People like James didn't understand that love wasn't a revolving door. Once it breaks enough times, it changes shape. It becomes something quieter, something guarded. By the second week, the backlash got louder. A cousin posted a cryptic status online. Some people forget who raised them. Others forget how to forgive. It didn't take a detective to know it was about me. I was tagged in fewer photos, mentioned in fewer conversations. Even mutual friends started drifting. One even messaged me, saying, I know you're hurt, but isn't family supposed to be unconditional? I stared at the screen, rage simmering beneath the surface. Unconditional was such a weaponized word. It implied that love meant tolerating anything, even betrayal, even abandonment. But I didn't reply. I didn't have to justify my boundaries to people who didn't witness the breaking. That month, I ran into Greg, a friend I hadn't seen since our daughters played soccer together back in the day. He was divorced now, struggling with custody battles, worn down by the grind of fatherhood and distance. We grabbed coffee, talked about life, work, the way our kids could cut us deeper than anyone else. When I told him about Layla, his jaw clenched. Man, he said, we give them everything. And when they grow up, they act like we were just a pit stop. I nodded. Yeah. And then they come back when the world's worse than they imagined, expecting everything to be waiting, untouched. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. You're not wrong for saying no. You're just the first one who had the guts to do it. Still, even validation like that didn't make the quiet any easier. Layla had once filled every corner of my life. Now, her absence echoed like footsteps in an abandoned hallway. I'd find myself reaching for my phone after work, instinctively checking to see if she'd texted me something random, a meme, a question about how to make her car stop squealing, a photo of her new favorite coffee. But nothing ever came. Just a blank screen. Just silence. I started cooking for one, rewatching old shows. I tried hobbies, woodworking, sketching, even joined a local pool league. But everything felt like filler. Like I was stalling for something that wasn't going to happen. One Sunday morning, I visited the park where we used to go when she was little. There was this old swing set, rusted around the edges, but still sturdy. I remember pushing her there until my arms were sore, her laughter ringing out like church bells. I sat on the bench across from it, watching other parents chase their toddlers through the grass. I envied their innocence, their ignorance. They didn't yet know what it was like to be discarded by someone you molded with your own hands. To give your life to someone, only for them to walk away when the truth got inconvenient. A woman sat beside me on the bench. Older, kind face. She was watching her granddaughter, who ran up every few minutes to show her a rock or flower. "Your kids out there?" she asked. I hesitated. "Used to be," I said. She didn't press, just nodded, like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe every parent ends up here someday, on the sidelines, watching the game go on without them. That night, I got another message from Layla. Short, simple. "I miss you. I'm sorry." My heart clenched, not because it changed anything, but because that 5-word sentence carried years of weight. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't have it in me to reopen that wound. Some apologies don't come with healing. Sometimes they're just reminders of everything that came too late. I started therapy again. It helped, not because it erased the pain, but because it gave it shape. Helped me separate my grief from my guilt. I had to learn that being a good father didn't mean being a doormat. That love, when stretched too thin, can become something unrecognizable. My therapist said something that stuck. "You taught her what real love looks like. Now you're teaching her what self-respect looks like." That hit me hard, because I'd always thought the ultimate act of fatherhood was sacrifice. But maybe it was survival. Maybe it was modeling what it looks like to stop bleeding for people who don't notice you're wounded. As the weeks turned to months, the noise died down. The family gossip faded. People moved on to new dramas. And I found peace. Not total peace, but enough. Enough to smile again without forcing it. Enough to enjoy a sunrise without wondering if she'd ever see it with me again. I kept her pictures. I didn't erase her from my life, but I stopped waiting for her to return. She had to find her way on her own now, and if she ever truly did. Well, we'd crossed that bridge then. I used to think fatherhood meant permanence. That once you stepped into that role, whether by blood or by choice, you wore it like a second skin for the rest of your life, no matter how worn or tattered it became. I believed that being a father was about constancy, about staying even when it got hard, even when it hurt. That belief carried me through every scraped knee, every late-night worry, every time Layla slammed a door in my face only to come crawling back hours later. But the last year had taught me something I never expected. Fatherhood, like love, is sacred, but it isn't without conditions. It demands presence, respect, and reciprocity. And when those things vanish, so does the role. I hadn't stopped loving her, but I had stopped sacrificing myself to keep a seat warm at a table she had no intention of returning to. I kept her last message, "I miss you. I'm sorry," unread in my inbox for months. Not because I was angry. Not even because I wanted to make a statement, but because I didn't know what it meant. "I miss you" didn't undo the day she walked out. "I'm sorry" didn't patch the places inside me that had been ripped wide open by her words, her silence, her indifference. Every time I looked at that message, I felt two things at once: the ache of what we had lost and the quiet clarity of what I had found in her absence. I had found peace. A hard one, fragile kind of peace, yes, but peace nonetheless. And I wasn't willing to trade that for a maybe. For another round of heartbreak wrapped in apologies and promises that wouldn't hold up under pressure. Life got simpler in her absence. Not easier, but cleaner. I started waking up earlier, drinking my coffee on the porch before work, just breathing in the quiet instead of dreading it. I stopped explaining myself to people who were never in the room when the real damage was done. I made new friends. Real friends. People who didn't ask me to shrink for their comfort. I started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious, just companionship, a shared meal, a hand to hold. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty about doing something just for me. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. Stopped replaying old voicemails. I let the past stay in the past. One day, I came across a box I'd nearly forgotten in the back of the closet. It was filled with Layla's childhood things, drawings, report cards, a paper crown she made for Father's Day when she was 7. I sat down on the floor, pulled everything out one by one. Each item was like a love letter from a different life. I laughed when I found a note she wrote in crooked handwriting. Dad, I love you more than all the socks in the world. I remembered that day. She was 5, and we'd spent the afternoon doing laundry together. I cried then, not because I missed her, but because I finally understood that I could treasure the memories without tethering myself to the pain. That box didn't hold my failure. It held proof that I had loved well, and that for a time, she had loved me back. A few weeks later, I ran into her at the grocery store. We both froze. She was standing near the apples, hair pulled back, no makeup, sweater too big on her frame. She looked smaller than I remembered, quieter. Her eyes widened when she saw me, and for a second, I thought she might turn and run. But she didn't. She walked over slowly, cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal. Hi, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Hi. The silence between us felt both endless and too short. How have you been? She asked. I took a breath. I've been okay. Figuring things out. She nodded, like she understood. Maybe she did. I wanted to say thank you, she said, eyes brimming. For everything. Even when I didn't see it. I see it now. I nodded again. I know you do. I hope you find what you're looking for. We didn't hug. We didn't make plans. We just stood there for a moment. Two people who had once been everything to each other, now strangers with shared history. And that was enough. That was all I needed. Closure didn't come wrapped in dramatic apologies or tearful reunions. It came quietly, in that brief moment of mutual recognition. I walked away feeling lighter, not because she'd come back, but because I didn't need her to anymore. Now, when people ask me if I have kids, I say, I raised a daughter. Not because I've disowned her, but because I honor what was without pretending it still is. I don't tell the whole story. I don't need to. The people who matter understand what it means to raise a child with everything you have, and then let go when it's no longer healthy to hold on. I've stopped trying to convince anyone that I did the right thing. I know I did, and that's enough. The house feels different now. Not empty. Just honest. Her room became a reading nook, then a small studio where I tinker with woodworking. The walls are filled with photos from new memories, new people. I kept one picture of Layla on the mantle. The two of us at the beach when she was 10. We're both laughing, arms covered in sand, wind whipping through our hair. It's a reminder that love existed, that I showed up, that I stayed. And when the time came, I chose to leave, not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally started loving myself enough to say, no more. They say closure is a door you shut yourself. I didn't slam it. I didn't lock it out of spite. I just closed it, gently, firmly. And then I turned around and walked into a life that finally felt like mine. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you raised, loved, and poured your soul into, just to protect your own peace? This story is for every parent who gave their all and got left behind. If you've ever had to choose yourself in the wake of heartbreak, I want to hear your story. Was I too harsh, or was it finally time to close that chapter for good? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real stories that aren't afraid to go deep. See you soon in the next one.